Hello everyone. So I'm going to walk you all through some practical test revision in this video. So firstly, what we're going to be discussing is how to set up a project. So I'll be using that mock test as an example, just to get it set up in the labs. If there are any struggles with getting set up in the labs thus far, I am going to be demonstrating this once more, just a foolproof method or a method that you can use to make sure you get your prac up and running as soon as possible during a practical test. Then we're going to read through the practical test instructions, and I'm going to highlight some important parts of that to you as well. So that's based off of the past paper that I've provided to you. And then we're going to go through just a demonstration of practical 5 step by step as has been shown in the practical lecture, but that's also just a past paper revision, and you can use this practical 5 to inform your practicing of the mock test, which you can also use as preparation. So without further ado, let's get into setting up a project using our mock test as an example. So when you log into Eve, I've provided you with the mock test past paper over there, which we'll read through the instructions in a little bit. So I'm just letting that open up in that tab. And then I also provided some additional files. So this is what you're going to use to build your practical test with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and download that. And so it's downloading on my screen this side, and I will see that over there. And now in my downloads folder, I've got this prac test, mock prac test.zip over there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to extract everything from there, and I'm also going to say extract. So there we go. When I click into this, I've got another folder that's called prac test mock. So this is actually the root folder in which everything is that I want. So I'm going to want to use not this root folder. I want to click into it, and then I want to copy this to my T drive essentially. Now on my computer I don't have a T drive, but I'm going to mimic it by copying it into the workspace that I'm going to be using. In Eclipse, you'll be using the T drive in the lab, so that should be your default workspace when you open up Eclipse. But I've made a prac demo workspace for that, so I'm going to copy this. Alright, so note, when I click into this, it gives me all the folders that are in that skeleton project. So I copied that one. Let me just copy it again. And then I head on over to where I have stored the workspace. Let me just quickly find that particular path. So pretend like this is my T drive. I have a PT demo workspace. Alright, so that is set up in Eclipse, and I'm going to come and paste that skeleton project over here. This is the prac test mock, and this is the project that I want to work on because it contains all of the files that have been provided, including the bat files and the source files and so forth. Alright. Now this is if you want to get set up in Eclipse. If you're comfortable with just working with the bat files, that is absolutely fine, and using a text editor such as Notepad++ or VS Code, that's also fine. But this is specifically for those who want to use Eclipse. So as you can see, I'm in my workspace, and that's where that prac test mock is now saved. In your instance, this will be the T drive where you've copied and pasted the project, where you click into it, just one click into it will give you this. So make sure you have this structure. Now I'm going to click on over to my Eclipse, which I've opened up, but it's a brand new workspace. This is what it will look like, and this is the PT demo workspace, right? For you, it will be your T drive workspace. So I'm going to say File, and I'm going to open projects from File System or Archive. Then I'm going to look for a directory, and it's already in my directory there for the prac test demo workspace. You will look for your T drive. I'm going to click on that. I'm going to say Select Folder, and then I'm going to say Finish. Alright, so as you can see, my prac test mock now appears in that corner over there. And so as you'll be able to see, I'll just get a magnifier just really quick so you can all see properly over here. in this corner. So magnifier, we zoom in a little bit here, you can see that's where my practice mock is over there, and I can click into it and open it up. I'm not sure if you can see properly, but there everything is. It's throwing errors because the libraries aren't set up or anything, but everything is essentially there that I might need to go ahead with this practical. So I don't know if that was helpful, but you'll see the structure on this end basically of the project. But it throws errors because the Java FX library has not been added. So let me open up this client.java and let me open up this evil client pane, and let me open up this client handler and the server.java. Okay, now you'll note this particular package, you need to check whether the package statements are at the top of these libraries as well, because sometimes it'll throw a little bit of an issue with that, but we'll fix that later on. But do be aware that you need to have your package declarations at the top of your classes. Very, very important. But first, let's go ahead and get our Java FX set up, and I really encourage you to get that done as soon as possible. Get a basic, just something up and running before you get too invested in your practical. All right, make sure it works. So firstly, what we're going to do is we're going to right click and we're going to go build path, and we're going to say add libraries, user library. Next, now I need to add a user library, a new one. I'm going to call it Java FX. I'm going to say OK. And then with this, I need to add external jars. Now mine is saved in the C. Now it's also saved in C on the lab machine. So you click into it, you go to the lib folder, and you select all of those jar files. You open them, and then we realize we need to add the source attachment. So I'm going to click on that. I'm going to say edit. We need to add that external file, and we need to click one back and select that src.zip, and we open that. Now you can copy this path. Let's copy it. So there we go. That's for the first one. It's done. The source attachment is done there. Let's do another one. Edit. Let's say external path. Paste it. OK. And carry on like that until we're done. Apply and close. There we go, and we finish it all off there. And there are, you can see many of the errors actually disappear because we've set up our Java FX over here, but it'll still give a little bit of an issue because we have not set up run configurations, and you'll see the classes actually also complain. And I think this text is probably really small, so let's go ahead and just fix the font size. Make it much larger. Let's see if that helps. Apply. Okay, I think that's a lot better. I can make it a little larger, maybe for readability. Let's make it a little bit larger, like 16. Apply. Okay, that's better. Apply and close. So here we can see inside of our Java client. Now you'll see at the top here, it's gonna complain a little bit, and that's because the package declaration is not at the top. So you all need to make sure if you get even errors with the batch files, it might be because the package declaration is not at the top of the class, so then it won't be able to find the class. All right, so you want to make sure you add that package declaration at the top for each and every one of them. Add package declaration. You can also add it manually. It's just you can add it manually. So package csc2b.client for the client one, and then for the handler it will be csc2b.server. Let's add that package declaration, and the same for the server. Just add that in. Let me type that manually. Package csc2b.server. There we go, and let's save. There should be a lot less complaints at the moment. As you can see, my issues have disappeared quite a lot now, so that seems all good. So now you'll see if we try to go ahead and type out some client pane and get a client pane to display, you'll see we'll still get that error, that famous error that we usually get. So let's go ahead and make our evil client pane, right? Let's call it just my pane is a new evil client pane. I've already created that constructor there. And now I create a scene. Let's give it just a size of 500 by 500 for now. You can play around with resolution there. Make sure you import the correct packages for JavaFX. So import scene, javafx.scene. And then we go ahead and we say primary stage dot set scene, right? You can also set the title. Remember, we're setting it to that scene. We can also set the title, primary stage dot set title, and we can make that to be, for instance, the just evil client, something like that. And then we say primary stage dot show. Now often what happens is a lot of us do all this code and we then try to run it, right? And then nothing will display, and it's because you didn't call the launch args in the main. You need to make sure something's in your main method, so do not forget to put that method there. So you're going to say launch, and we're going to say args, and there we go. But now remember, we've not set up the run configuration, so let us quickly run this and see. All right, exactly, we get that error as expected. So if we get this error, we want to go ahead and fix the run configuration. Okay, now I would have provided you with a nice guide to get your to get it all set up. So you've got your JavaFX guide, which will be provided to you, and you can get the arguments from there. It's actually very straightforward. It's just setting the module path and the module, the actual module classes or files, source files, jar files. There we go. So let's copy that and go back to our Eclipse. So we get an error, right? So let us go ahead and fix that error. So you go ahead, run as, and run configurations. Now note, you won't see anything here unless you've run your client with the main. So make sure you run it and get the error so that you can go and fix the arguments, the VM arguments for this. So if we go ahead and fix the VM arguments, we just make it a little larger. I'm copying the VM arguments in there, and there we go. I say apply, all right, and I close it. Now when I run it, I expect it to work, or to just at least pop up something for me. So run, and there we go. I've actually got something running. Evil client is over there. I actually have two instances now. All right, there we go, and it's running and it's working. And so now I know, okay, good, I can keep on going and keep on coding for the rest of this. Now if you weren't using Eclipse, you would have had to put in the package statement at the top there, and then it'll also work. I'll show you that this project actually does work with our with our bat file. So if I first select clean bin.bat, you'll see all of this, just where it's cleared out everything there. Then I can run my server, but my server does nothing just yet. I fixed the client, so let's run the client. You'll get it compiling. I press any key to continue. It compiles my project, it runs my project, and you'll see it correctly runs as well. So whether you want to go use Eclipse or you use the bat files, it should work. Remember, I do require the bat files, so it does have to eventually work. If you get it correctly set up in Eclipse, it will by default work. Just make sure, whichever path you choose, that your main classes can work with the bat files. And for it to work with the bat files, your main classes have to remain the same. It has to be named as in the source provided. For a client, the main class has to be called client, and the package structure has to be the same as here. And for the server, it has to be called server, and the package structure has to be the same as up top there. Okay, so I hope that that was clear in terms of getting it set up and getting it running. I also highly recommend, and we'll go through the instructions of the prac test now, or the mock test, which will be similar. The instructions will be similar for the prac test. You want to make sure that you upload regularly, because look, there are most of the machines will probably be functioning fine, but in case it happens that your machine gives an issue or it freezes, we want to have a backup available, not just on the T drive, but rather uploaded to file storage as well. So I highly recommend that you go ahead and you upload every couple of minutes, or as soon as you've completed a section, you upload that code. Make sure it does compile when you do upload incrementally. So maybe every 15 to 20 minutes, I'd highly recommend you upload, just so that you have a backup available, so that it's much less admin if you have to move computers, which in the ideal case scenario will not happen. And alternative arrangements will be made if there are really major hiccups. So do not stress, everybody will get a fair opportunity for this test. So I've discussed how to set up a project, but then the next thing we wanted to speak about was actually the practical test instructions. So let me go to that practical test that I've just opened up over here. And I want to speak through these instructions. So firstly, with your practical test, you're not to log into Eve. If you are caught logging into Eve, it is considered cheating. You are not allowed to log in, because that's where your lecture notes are, that's where your practicals are. All right, you're not allowed to access anything. It is a closed book test, it's not open book. So you may only access file storage directly from the home page on Eve. If you're not sure what that looks like, if I log out here, over here you'll see I can directly access file storage without being logged into Eve. So if I go to file storage, look, there's nothing to display at the moment, but on the day of your test, the link for the question paper will be available, and after you've started to write, the link for uploading will become available as well. So here you'll see, go to file storage and click on the link called Computer Science 2B Practical Semester Test Question. That is the link name where you will be downloading your particular question paper along with the skeleton project. When you are prompted for your username and password here, this is where you can enter your normal Eve credentials. Okay, that should be all fine. Now, when you're writing the practical test, you'll have a question paper in front of you. You'll either have paper A or you'll have paper B. Now, if you have paper A in front of you, you can only download paper A's files. So you need to make sure you download the correct files. If you have paper B, you only download paper B's files. So here it was called paper mock. Okay, so you would only be able, or you should only download the paper mock.pdf. For paper A, it will be paper A.pdf. So that's a digital version of the physical question paper. Why am I providing you with a digital version of the question paper if you already have a physical copy in front of you? The reason is I want you to be able to access the backup link by clicking on it. Now, you'll be able to type in the backup link manually as well, that is fine, but just to save time, you can click on the link inside of the physical question paper. Then you'll also have access to your practice. It'll either be practice A or practice B.zip, and these files are for you to complete your test. So this is the skeleton project I'm providing you with. And then everyone will have access to the Eclipse JavaFX project setup guide PDF document, where you can get those run configuration arguments, or if you've forgotten how to get JavaFX set up in Eclipse, this is the guide, so you can refer to that. But I'd highly recommend you practice this because it's something you need to know how to get set up very quickly in your test. Right, so I will provide you with a password which will be printed on your question paper for you to unlock your paper. Okay, now the paper that you have in front will have a password, and only that password will work for your particular paper. Okay, so you need to make sure you only unlock the paper that has been allocated to you. Save your work on the T drive. Now, we say you need to save every 5 minutes and you need to submit regularly. Now, submission regularly, that's going to be determined by you, but I would definitely recommend as much as possible, or when you've completed a whole section, to upload to Eve. Then your final submitted zip folder must be named as follows. So it'll be surname, initials, student number, Computer Science 2B 2022 Practical Test Mock. Okay, so just for demonstration purposes, let's pretend like in the test I have completed this entire test. So what I'll do now is I'll actually go to where this location is, where it's stored, which for you it would be on the T drive. And now if I open this up, I will have to store this, and I have to compress this and save it in the correct format, right? The same format as is specified over here to me. Okay, surname, initials, student number, and so forth. So what I do is I will right click on this, I'll say send to a compressed zip folder, and now this zip folder, you can go ahead and rename it. So it'll be whatever my surname is, underscore my initials, underscore whatever my student number is, right, underscore CSC 02 B2 underscore 2022, and then at the very end I'll call it whatever my practical test was that I wrote. So it would be PT and then whichever test I wrote. So this one was mock, right? So there I have it, and this is then the file that I will upload to Eve, all right? Because it's containing that particular item that I have saved on my T drive, that completed project. So right click, send to compressed zip folder, and then you can rename the zip folder, right? Don't go mess with the project there, but once you zip, you want to name it completely correctly, all right? So that is it for actually naming and finally submitting. Be sure to include the provided batch files. You would have realized that your batch files are an important part of testing your practicals. No difference with the practical test. So you'll see the 3 batch files that have been provided to you. You've got your clean bin, you've got your build server, and you've got your build client. Then you need to upload your final submission to file storage link, and there will be a link that's not called question paper. It will just be Computer Science 2B practical test or mock test, all right? Do not log into Eve once again. So you upload there, and you upload a backup to the link that is provided. So you will click on this link and it'll open up the file request Dropbox backup where you upload. Now, do not close your upload. So for the assistant to come and see that you have done everything correctly and you've uploaded, you leave it on the Dropbox status where it says you've successfully uploaded to the Dropbox link, all right? And you open Eve file storage to show us that you have successfully uploaded. Okay, once again, I remind you to save and submit regularly. Then you'll have a physical paper in front of you, and you'll see that there is on page 3 of 4, there is a form for you to fill in. So when you're ready to submit, you are going to fill in this form. You're going to type in your student number, your initials and your surname, as well as your ID number. And then you need to read through this text over here and tick the last column. So the first one says, the full and final submission that I intend to submit has been uploaded to the correct locations as specified by the invigilators. Now, it's already been specified in the instructions as well. A zip file containing the full and final solution listed in point 1 has been uploaded to Eve. Then you tick that. And then you have personally confirmed that the version of the full and final solution has been saved to a backup media, and this is the correct copy of the solution in point 1. You tick that if you've uploaded to Dropbox, and then you sign there, give your signature. Then an assistant's going to come to you. The assistant will check that you've uploaded to Eve and check that you've kept the Dropbox link open. So do not waste our time by putting up your hand and then still needing to open things up. Have it open, ready, and confirm with the assistant. The assistant will then write down their details and confirm that you have officially submitted. You will then come through with your question paper, as well as you'll have just an answer sheet that to wrap everything up in, which you will also fill out your details on. And you'll come and you'll check with the person who is double checking submissions before you exit that your submission is successfully been seen on Eve, and then you may exit the venue. Okay, that was a mouthful, but I think it is necessary so that you all are aware of how the structure will flow and all the instructions required for the practical test. So here is the mark sheet. Make sure you are aware of where you'll get marks for as well. Okay, so that is that for the practical test setup as well as the instructions. So I'm going to close this up now, and I'm going to go ahead and step through an example of our practical 5 solutions. So I'm just quickly going to switch the workspace, and I'm going to go to that particular solution, and we're going to explain through that, and hopefully it will be helpful to you in what you did with practical 5 to understand what happened there and where things went right, where things went wrong, and maybe just clarifying certain concepts to you once again. Okay, so this project has already been set up. It's got JavaFX, it's got cc2b.client, and everything there, the data. There's already data in the client. I'm just gonna delete that because it was a download one. Let's delete that. Okay, so this is for a download application. You do need to know how to do an upload as well from Practical 4. So which one you'll get will depend. But this one was a download, so for you to download from server to the client. So let's open up our classes here and do just a quick demo, and then I'll step through the code for it. Let's once again make our appearance a little bit larger. Make it 16. A little bit larger. Okay, so let me go ahead, click on my client. I want to run my client. Okay, and I want to run my server. Nothing will work without my server working, so let's run my server. Okay, there we go. It's bound to port 2021, as you can see at the bottom there. And I have my client. So first things first, I'm going to say connect, and then I'm going to enter the username and the password. So the username, in this instance, it's in the users.txt folder. It's user followed by PASS235. So let me type that in, user and PASS235, do a greeting. There you can see all the responses that come back from the server is displayed to the user. Very, very important. Then I want to get the playlist back. So here we go. I see that, okay, there's classical strings. So I'm reading from that text file, right? From the list.txt or song list or whatever, right? And then I say, okay, I want to get file number 2. I want the Dreamy Piano one. I want to download that to my client. So when I hit refresh on this end, it should be transferred to the client. So let's say 2, and I get it, and it then indicates, okay, yes, and this is the amount of bytes that have been downloaded or sent to the client. So if I hit refresh here, you'll see Dreamy Piano came through on the other side there. It actually got transferred to my client. And then lastly, I just log off, and it closes everything up, and I am logged out. All the streams have been successfully closed. So that is that. So let's step through the code for this solution. Very simple solution of just a simple download from a server to a client, and just stop my server from running there. Okay. Remember, if you have multiple servers running, you'll maybe get an exception. So make sure you close all the runs by clicking on the gray buttons at the bottom here, or the gray X's, to just close all the previous runs and stuff. So yeah, you've got your user.txt to check the password, and you've got a list.txt that lists all of the available files, all right? So this is a download one. Practical 4 showed you an upload as well, so I refer to that video if you want to see how an upload happens. So let's firstly start with the client. Now on my client, we've got our package csc2b.client, very important at the top there. I've got all my import for JavaFX there. It extends application, and therefore it implements the start method. So in my main method, I have to have that launch args, and then I have to have my client pane that's set up. I give it a particular size, I give it a width, I give it a height. I set my scene, I can set a title, and then I show it. And nothing too difficult here in my client. The main class you should know how to do with closed eyes. All right, let's go to the main server class. In my server, I always have a server socket as a member variable. I have a boolean to indicate if the server is ready to be running, or to process commands. And then you always have your server, which is your server constructor, and you'll want to pass the port number that it needs to link with there usually. So firstly, we create a server socket, and as you can see, that typically counts 2 marks, and it binds to the particular port that's specified by the user. This will be specified when the user in the main actually calls this constructor and passes it a port number. All right, then I can say, okay, the server is bound to this particular port, and I can say, okay, ready is true, and then I can say, okay, while I'm ready, print out while we're waiting for clients, and then I create my socket connection, right? This is what the ss.accept, or my server socket's accept method, blocks until it receives a connection from a client, and then it goes ahead and I can then pass that to my thread. So I create a new thread, which is wrapped around my handler. Now my handler extends or it implements the runnable interface, which makes it a thread, and I pass to it in its constructor. So you have to make sure that constructor is set up that way. I pass to it this client connection, and I say client thread dot start. So if you have a multi-threaded client handling, you get 5 marks in the bag. Of course, always have your exception handling, and we've got our main class here, which just sets up our server and gets it up and running. So that's everything over there. And then we've got our handler class. It implements the runnable interface, and as such, it has to implement the run method, or have the run method. And over here you can see I've got my constructor, which passes that connection. So before we get fully to the handler and discussing it, let's go to our client pane. And so if you want to get your client pane, just a basic version working, even if you just have the constructor, empty constructor at first, and then you want to build on it. You want to decide which GUI elements you want to have, so you can do some planning on paper beforehand and then set up your GUI. Now, as you can see, I also have a number of member variables here. I've got my socket, this is my client socket. I've got my text streams. I've got my binary streams. I've got my byte streams. And then I also created a string array which will keep in memory on the client side the list data that gets read from the list.txt file. So next thing is I set up my UI. So I create a helper method, and this is at the bottom of the class where I set up my user interface. So here is that method for setting the UI. It returns a void, and I just set it all up here. Nothing fancy here, it's just adding everything such as the labels, the text boxes, the buttons, as well as the list areas, or the text areas, so to speak. So I've got the list from the server that can be displayed in a list area or a text area, and I've got the response messages, like the statuses that come back from the server as well for my client. And then you need to add everything. In the grid pane view, you can use the row span and the col span to clearly just set all of that up. You're welcome to use any alternative format over there. Great, so then we get to our first button click. So in my constructor, I can have my button that wants to connect, and I used a nice lambda expression to keep it all neat. And I want to try set up my socket. When I first create a connect button, I highly recommend having this, where you first set up your connections and you set up your streams. Very, very important. Text streams and binary streams being set up here, and always catch your exceptions. Unknown host exception, especially for a socket that connects to a specific host, and then an IO exception. All right, then let's move on to the first greeting, where they enter the username and the password. So I say txt_out.println, I send the greeting, and I get the username that was entered by the user, and I get the password that was entered by the user, and I flash that. And then I need to get a response, okay? So that's by reading from my character stream. So this is to see if I am successfully logged in or not, okay? So let's go back to the handler to see how it handles when the bonjour command is sent to it. So let's just take a bit of a step back. Firstly, when this handler is created, all the streams get set up, okay? So all the streams get set up when the connection comes in. I set up the streams and have some error handling there. Then the run method gets called automatically. Now I'm starting to process commands here for this particular client. So this will also be in a while true loop. I'm processing for this particular client. So this will be true until I log out, when processing might become false at the very end when I say goodbye, right? For this particular client. It's not like my server is going to stop, because my server is still in its own loop over here. The server is still ready to handle clients. But for this particular client's connection, I have a loop here. So first things first is the handler gets in a general request, right? And it could be any request of those 3 or 4 that I have set. Yeah, the 4 commands that I've set. So firstly, you just read a line and you can print it out to yourself. And then we use a string tokenizer to break down this particular command that comes in. The first thing that comes through is the command. And then I used a switch statement. You can use an if statement to analyze this command to see what it is. If it is a bonjour command, then we know, okay, I will receive, as the next token, I'll receive a username, and the following token after that will be the password. All right. So then I can use this match user helper method Do use the helper methods for the test purposes. They are given for a reason. So you want to make sure you use them as they are provided to you. So if match user is true, then authenticated becomes true. So I'm keeping track of that Boolean there. If the user is authenticated, only if they're authenticated can they actually log in or continue with the other commands. And so you'll see this authenticated question is always put in place for the different commands. Otherwise, they cannot be handled. The user cannot go further on if they're not authenticated. Okay, so if the authentication is true, I say, yes, you're logged in, and I flush. But let's see, what does this match user method actually do? So if I go all the way to the bottom where this match user method is, it returns a Boolean. It takes in a string and another string. Firstly, we say the user is not found. By default, it's false. Then we look through the users that are on record for this particular application. So that's in the data/server/user.txt. And then you can use a scanner to read through this user file. So I set up that scanner, and then I say, while my scanner has a next line and the Boolean found remains false. Okay, so I'm just searching through the users. I'm going to say, okay, the line is the line that I'm reading. Now, note, your users.txt could have multiple lines of users stored into it. But then I use the nice string method called split. So I split by empty space so that I can distinguish between the username and the password. The username is at index 0 and the password is at index 1. So once I split that up, I can go ahead and compare the user. So I say if my line sec at 0, so if the username is equal to the username that was passed in through this parameter, and if the password is equal to the password that was provided through this parameter, then I know that my Boolean found becomes true. I'll exit that particular while loop over there, and I can close my scanner. And then at the end of the day, if the user is found, found will become true. If the user is not found, it will remain false. And so that's why it's an effective method for checking for a login over there. So I hope that's nice and clear to you for matching your user and then successfully logging them in or not. If they're not logged in, we're going to say unsuccessful login and flush that out to the user. Great, let's go on to the next command. The next command is the playlist. This is where I want to get the list back that is stored in the list.txt file to my client. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to send the command playlist according to my custom protocol, and I'm going to wait for a response from my server. So the server does heavy lifting in this case. So I'm going to read a long line from my server. It's an effective way of doing it because it's such a short, small program that we're working with and a short list. So before I discuss this further on, let's go and see how my server handles it, because then this will make sense to you all. So if I come in here and I see, okay, what if I receive the playlist command from my client? I'm going to check, are they authenticated? Yes. If they're not authenticated, I'm going to say, give them the error message according to the protocol. Remember, you need to check what the protocol requires in terms of what the response codes are, and flush. But if it's successful, I'm going to use the helper method once again to get the file list from the list.txt. Okay, so this is the first step that I do. So let's go look at this helper method that I use to read the file contents into an array list. As you can see, an array list of type string. So here is that method. It's quite simple and straightforward. It returns an array list of type string. So you create an array list of type string called result, and you establish that. Then we create a file that is linked to our list.txt, and we use a scanner that then can read from this file. While the scanner has a next, has a line in its file, it can add to the result. So we're adding the next line to the particular array list. When you're done, we close it, remember exception handling, and then we return the result. So as it reads through this list, it'll add each and every line to an array list of type strings. So at index 0, it'll have, or the first one will have classical strings, second one will have dreamy piano, third one will have jazz blues. Okay, great. So once we've done that, we now want to send it across to our user. But an effective way of doing that is to actually send it as a single line that is delimited by a special character. So I'm going to loop through this file array list that I've created by calling my helper method, and I'm going to build up a string. Now you can use string builder, but I just concatenate it to my string. So I say toString equals toSend plus the string that's found in this file array plus a hash that separates it each out, and then I send a single long string across to my client. So what then happens on my client side is the client receives one long line that is delimited by a hash. You can use any other symbol that works for you, like an asterisk or an ampersand, a percentage sign, whatever works for you. And we then go ahead and we can loop through this array, this list data array, all right? Remember, you've created it as a member variable at the top here. So then what I can do is I use my for loop to loop through it, and I can append to this list area, right? That's a JavaFX text area. Append the text and append whatever is in my list data at position 0, 1, and 2, whether it goes on and on and on, and also separate it with a character return line feed just so that we get it on a new line each time and the display format is nice. And you catch your exception. But that is the playlist command completed. Now you get to the core of your prac, and we need to get a file from my server, like that dreamy piano that we transferred, right? So now let's go ahead and we say, okay, the user will obviously have sent through an ID number that it wants to use. So you get that text, and we send the command to our server. Now we have to have an integer to store the size of the file that we're going to be receiving, right? And so you're going to get a response from the server first, and it's going to be in this format, yar and file size. Okay, so once you've got that file size, you want to first split the responses, and you want to parse it as an integer to get that file size, to know that this is the file size that we need to get ready to actually receive. Okay, and this is just to show the status message to the client. Okay, so let's see just up to here what this looks like on the handler side for it to send this response back. So we've got our handler. We first check if it's authenticated, otherwise I can't be sending files to this client. I get the ID, that will be the next token after the command, and then I need to get that particular file, whatever this ID is that the user sent. I need to get the file name so that I can get the path to that file and then send that particular file's size to my client. So that's why I provided a helper method called ID to file name, and it takes in the file ID that was sent by the user, because the user didn't provide you with the file name that they want, they just gave you the ID. So it's up to you to do some heavy lifting on the server side to get what file name corresponds to this ID. So then we go ahead and we look at this ID to file name, string ID. We look through our list.txt, right? So we once again can use a scanner to read through this text file. While it has a next, we're going to say, okay, line is equal to scan.nextLine, and we're going to break this line down using a string tokenizer. The ID is the first token, and the file name is the next token. If this ID that we find as we loop through each line is equal to the ID that was passed, we know that we found the correct file name, because that will be that token over there. So we can then say, okay, the search has been completed. The result is equal to the file name that is been found over here. And you can close your scanner and you'll return the result. So make sure you understand this algorithm and how this search algorithm's logic works. So in that case, we've now found the file name, and I can go ahead up here and I can create a new file to send, and this will already in memory create a file that is linked with this particular file stored in memory. So if this was ID number 1, it would be classical strings.mp3. I create a path to that file, and I can then use the .length file, .length method of a file to send that to the user to know how many bytes this file is. So that's why I then go ahead and I say, if this file to send exists, it's a good check to have in place, okay? Otherwise, you'll have to send a status message to say the file does not exist. So firstly, I can say, yes, this is the file's length in bytes, and I flash it. All right, so that's how we'll go ahead and send that to the user, and the user will get that. And then immediately after that, I will get ready to send that file across. Now, I'll speak to this in a little bit, but let's go back to our client pane. Now on the client pane, we've just had a response from our server that will give us the file size. And now what I need to do is I need to also determine what am I going to call this file that the user has requested. So now in this implementation, we want you to also do a search. So you go through the list data and you use your string tokenizer, all right? You get the ID and you get the file name for each list data item. If the ID is equal to the ID that has been requested by the user, right, then you know, okay, I've found the file name as well. So then we know what to call this file. So you know what the file to get's name is. It's data/client. This is where we're going to store it. So you create a file and you know what you're going to name it over there, and you give it a path name. So we know now that we're needing to get ready to receive it from the server. So the server is going to send it to us, and as it sends it to us, we need to create a file output stream so that we can write to this file for which we've allocated some memory and a new file name. You create your byte array, you create your integer n, which is used to keep track of the amount of bytes that are read, and you keep track of the total bytes. While the total bytes have not reached the size of the file that you're expecting to receive, right, you're going to read whatever is in, you're going to read whatever is coming in to the data input stream, and you're gonna read it into the buffer from byte 0 to buffer.length. Then you're going to use your file output stream to write whatever is in the buffer from byte 0 up until n, right, which you've determined just over here. That'll be the amount of bytes that have been read into the buffer. And you're going to flash it so that it continuously writes to this file that you want to save on the client side. You're going to increment your total bytes that have been read with n, and this will continuously happen until the entire file has been received. And then you can, once it's done, say file's been received on the client side. And then you'll also always want to close your file output stream once you've been done with it. So make sure you close that, right? For the sending side, this is what it would have looked like. We read into memory our file that we want to send. So we create that stream. We create a byte array buffer. We have an integer to keep track of. Then you say, okay, while we are reading bytes from this file input stream into the buffer, as long as it's greater than 0 and there's continuously bytes coming in, use the data output stream to write whatever is in the buffer from byte 0 up until byte n and flash that. And then you could have also put a nice finally block here to close your file input stream. but it doesn't seem to be complaining too much because there is an overall exception catch at the end there. But to be very specific, you'd want to put an IR exception. And then here you could say, okay, otherwise if the file does not exist, obviously you say file does not exist. Okay, so that was that for the heavy part of the practical. Then you need to make sure you have your log off button and listener. So for log off, you are going to send to the server a bye message, and you're going to flush that, and you will then receive a response from the server, and you can also append that text to the text area. And then you're going to go ahead and close your binary and your text streams. You're also going to close your socket. Very, very important step here. Connection cleanup, 5 marks. Okay? And then remember your coding convention as well as your Java doc commenting. All of that will be very, very important for you. Go have a look at the mark sheet. So on the handler side, if we receive the ZM by, we're going to check if I'm authenticated, then you can say goodbye to me. If you're not authenticated, you can't even say goodbye to me. So then you have to have a status message over there. But if I'm authenticated, I'm going to say, okay, txt out.println, okay, you're logged out successfully. And then we go ahead and we do a connection cleanup as well. And we're going to close our connection to the client, and processing becomes false for this particular client. And that's the end of it. If I'm done with this, I can go ahead and I can zip this folder. You can go to properties to see where it's stored. And then you go ahead and you send it to a compressed zip folder, right? And then everything should be fine. At the end of the day, you upload to Eve, you upload to the backup, and you're done for your practical test. So I hope that was helpful for practical test 5. Use this as a basis to try for the mock test. It's very similar, it just uses images, so you can go ahead and try that out. All of the very best with your practical test.